My girlfriend wanted an open relationship, so I watched her drift away. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved one. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. It happened on a Tuesday night, halfway through dinner. Emily had been quiet all evening, picking at her food, her eyes darting everywhere but at me. The clink of her fork hitting the plate was sharper than usual, and when she finally met my gaze, there was something in her expression I couldn't read, cold, almost rehearsed. I want to try an open relationship, she said. Just like that. No lead-in, no warning. For a second, I didn't even process it. The words didn't fit in my head. Then it hit me all at once, like my chest had been scooped out and replaced with nothing. I tried to read her face, searching for some hint that she was joking, but there wasn't a flicker of doubt in her voice. She started talking about freedom and exploring herself, using those vague phrases people grab when they've already made up their mind. She spoke like she was pitching me a business idea. I noticed her eyes kept drifting down to her hands, twisting the napkin in her lap, like she didn't want to see my reaction. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a new thought. This wasn't curiosity. This was a decision she'd already acted on. I could have asked right then. I could have demanded names, dates, details. Instead, I forced my shoulders to relax and let the corners of my mouth lift just slightly. I nodded, slow and measured, like she'd suggested something completely reasonable. I told her I understood, that I was fine with it. The lie tasted metallic in my mouth. Her relief was immediate. She smiled, actually smiled, and the tension in her shoulders eased. She probably thought she'd dodged an argument, that I was being mature about it. I let her keep thinking that. As she went back to eating, I watched her carefully. The faint trace of perfume that wasn't the one I'd bought her, the lipstick a shade darker than she usually wore, the barely there smudge on her collar. These weren't details you notice when you trust someone. These were signs I'd been trying to ignore for weeks. Now, I didn't have to ignore them anymore. I kept the conversation light for the rest of the meal, asking about her day, letting her talk. Every answer she gave felt like it was balancing on the edge of a lie. But I smiled. I played along, because I'd already decided something, too. If she wanted freedom, I'd give her all the rope she needed. And when she showed me who she really was, I'd be ready. Not to save the relationship, not to win her back, but to make sure she never forgot what she'd thrown away. It didn't take long for things to change. Little by little, she wasn't really there anymore. She started coming home later than usual, saying work had been busy or a last-minute meeting had popped up. At first, I acted like I believed her, nodding and asking how it went. She always gave short answers, like she didn't want to talk about it. Her clothes would smell faintly different, like she'd walked through a cloud of someone else's cologne before stepping inside. Her phone became something she guarded. It was always face down on the counter or clutched in her hand, even when she went to the kitchen for a drink. If it buzzed, she'd glance at it quickly and then tuck it away. She never left it charging in the open anymore. Conversations between us got shorter. She didn't laugh the way she used to, and there was no curiosity in her voice when she asked about my day, if she asked at all. Sometimes she'd answer me without looking up, eyes on her phone, thumbs moving fast over the screen. The weekends changed too. She'd say she was meeting friends or going to a girls' night, but never invited me along. If I offered to drop her off or pick her up, she'd tell me it wasn't necessary. She'd leave dressed up, makeup done more carefully than usual, lipstick a shade that made her look like someone I barely recognized. I didn't confront her. Not once. I let her think I was just going along with this new arrangement. I still made dinner, still asked if she needed anything, still kissed her cheek when she left. It was easier to let her think I didn't notice what was happening, but I was paying attention to everything. I started keeping track of the nights she went out, the excuses she gave, the exact words she used. I made mental notes of the times she claimed to be in one place, but couldn't answer my calls. I noticed when her clothes were wrinkled like she'd been sitting somewhere for hours, and when her hair looked like someone had run their hands through it. She didn't realize I was building a pattern. Every detail was fitting together in my head, making it harder to believe any of her stories. She thought she was hiding things well, but she was slipping without realizing. When she was home, she was distracted, almost restless. She'd scroll through her phone while we watched a movie, glancing toward the screen only when I spoke. It was like she had one foot out the door all the time. I kept my voice steady, my expression calm. I didn't let her see the way I was adding everything up. She thought she had the upper hand, that she was in control of how this would play out. She had no idea I was just waiting for the right moment to show her I knew exactly what she'd been doing. That Friday night, she said she was going to Sarah's place for a quiet evening. She mentioned it casually, slipping it into conversation while grabbing her jacket. I nodded, told her to have fun, and watched her walk out the door. 5 minutes later, I left too. I stayed far enough back that she wouldn't notice me, following her down familiar streets until she reached a busier part of town. Instead of turning toward Sarah's neighborhood, she headed straight for a small bar tucked between two shops. The lights inside were low, warm, and crowded with shadows moving between tables. I stopped across the street, watching from behind a parked car. My stomach was tight, my pulse fast. She walked in without looking around, moving like she'd been there many times before. Through the window, I saw her pause for only a second before her face lit up. Not the polite smile she gave me at home, but something warmer. She made her way to a corner booth, where a man was already sitting. Tall, broad-shouldered, leaning back like he owned the space. The moment she slid into the seat beside him, he pulled her close, his arm wrapping around her waist like it had always been there. She didn't hesitate. She kissed him right there, in plain sight, no hesitation, no glance over her shoulder. It wasn't the kiss of two people figuring things out. It was comfortable, practiced. My hands felt cold, but I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. One of her walking in, one of them together in the booth, another of his arm around her. I made sure the angle was clear, no question about who I was looking at. They talked, leaning in close. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm, tilting her head the way she used to with. The sight made my chest feel heavy, but I stayed exactly where I was. I wanted every detail recorded. I didn't go inside. I didn't knock on the glass or call her name. That wasn't the moment for it. This wasn't about making a scene. This was about being sure. About having something I could hold on to when she tried to twist the story later. When I'd seen enough, I put my phone away and crossed the street in the opposite direction. The air felt colder than when I'd left the apartment. I didn't rush home. I walked slowly, letting the images replay in my head until they felt burned into me. By the time I reached the apartment, it was quiet and dark. I sat in the living room without turning on a light, phone in my hand, staring at the photos. She wouldn't be home for another hour. And when she did come back, she'd have no idea I already knew everything. The morning after, sunlight was spilling through the blinds when she walked in holding a mug. She set it on the nightstand and sat beside me like nothing in the world was wrong. Her tone was light, almost playful, when she asked if I'd met anyone yet. It was the kind of question you ask when you already expect the answer. I didn't hesitate. I told her I'd been talking to someone. It wasn't true, but the look on her face told me what I needed to know. A small smirk tugged at her lips, like she'd been waiting to hear it. Relief. That was the expression. She probably thought it made everything even, that it erased whatever guilt she might have felt. If I was seeing someone too, then neither of us was the bad guy in her mind. That was the game she was playing, balancing her story, so she didn't have to feel wrong. For a moment, I thought about ending it right there. I could have told her where she'd really been last night, shown her the photos, watched that smug look disappear. But that would have been too easy for her. She would have cried, maybe apologized, and found some way to spin it. No, I wanted her to think she was safe first. So instead, I told her I'd been thinking we should make the arrangement official. Put it into words. Have rules, just so things didn't get messy. I made it sound reasonable, like I was trying to protect us both. She agreed without hesitation, leaning back against the headboard like she was pleased with how adult we were being about it. We talked about boundaries, no dating friends, no staying out all night without checking in, no bringing anyone back to our place. I kept my tone steady, my expression calm, but every rule I suggested was one I already knew she'd break. She didn't know I'd been keeping track of her nights out, her little disappearances, her late return. When she nodded along, I could almost see her mind working, already finding ways around them. She thought she could keep hiding things the way she had been. She didn't realize I was setting traps, making her own promises the rope she'd hang herself with. By the time we finished, she seemed lighter, more relaxed. She leaned over, kissed my cheek, and told me she was glad we could be so open with each other. I just smiled, sipping the coffee she'd brought me. She thought we were agreeing to the same thing. She thought this was the start of something easier. In reality, it was the first step toward making sure she couldn't talk her way out when the truth came crashing down. A few days after we agreed on the rules, I sat at my desk and made a dating profile. I wasn't looking for dates or connection. This was a tool, nothing more. I kept the pictures simple, the bio short, just enough to get attention without giving away too much. It didn't take long before matches started showing up. Most were strangers, but then one name caught my eye, Claire. I recognized her from the photos Emily had shown me months ago, the ones from her work parties. She was one of Emily's coworkers. I swiped right. We matched instantly. Our first messages were harmless. Small talk about work, weekend plans, nothing too personal. I made sure not to bring up Emily directly. Instead, I kept the conversation easy, letting her do most of the talking. The more comfortable she got, the more details slipped out. It started with little comments. How Emily was the fun one in the office. How she was always at the center of every happy hour. Then it shifted to more pointed things, how she'd been getting close to certain people, how she was always texting someone during meetings. I listened, encouraged her to keep talking, and never once acted surprised. Claire seemed to enjoy having someone to gossip with, especially when she realized I wasn't defending Emily. She didn't know who I was to her. To her, I was just another guy she'd met online. Every so often, I'd drop a vague comment, something like, "Yeah, I've heard some things too," and let her fill in the blanks. That was the trick. I didn't have to accuse or ask. She'd supply the stories herself. And she did. It wasn't long before I had a clearer picture of what Emily had been doing outside the apartment and outside the bar I'd followed her to. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was her lifestyle. She was keeping herself busy with more than just one person, and from the way Claire told it, she wasn't being shy about it either. I didn't press for every detail at once. I let the information come naturally over a few weeks, like I was slowly piecing together a puzzle. In the meantime, I made sure Claire liked talking to me. A joke here, a compliment there, just enough to keep her comfortable. What Emily didn't know was that she was already talking about me at work. Not me as her boyfriend, but me as this mysterious guy Claire had been chatting with. Without realizing it, she was helping me build the image I wanted. I wasn't looking to win Claire over or take things further with her. I was looking for leverage, and by the time I was done, I'd have more than enough to turn the story in my favor, and to make sure Emily wouldn't see it coming until it was far too late. It started small, so small she probably didn't notice at first. A couple of her friends stopped responding to her messages as quickly. Invitations to group dinners or weekend plans seemed to skip over her. When she brought it up, I just shrugged, acting like I didn't know why. At work, things began to shift too. She'd come home and complain that her boss seemed cold, barely acknowledging her in the morning. Meetings felt tense, she said, like people were whispering about something she wasn't part of. I'd nod, listening, keeping my face calm. Then Claire did her part. One evening, while Emily and Claire were in the break room, Claire accidentally let it slip that people had been talking. She mentioned wild nights, and a lot of attention lately, in a tone that sounded casual, but was designed to stick in Emily's head. Claire told me later how quickly Emily's expression changed, how she froze for a second before forcing a laugh. The effect was slow but steady. Emily became more guarded. She started checking her phone constantly, even more than before, as if she could see rumors spreading in real time. She'd stand in front of the mirror longer in the mornings, trying different outfits, looking for something that might make her feel in control again. Then came the night she broke. It was late when she came through the door. Her eyes were red, her hair pulled back in a messy knot like she hadn't bothered to fix it after work. She dropped her bag on the couch and just stood there, staring at the floor. I asked what was wrong, and she tried to brush it off. But a moment later, her voice cracked. She sat down and buried her face in her hand. The tears came hard and fast. She told me she didn't understand why people were acting differently toward her, why some friends had stopped calling, why her boss wouldn't look her in the eye. I didn't let her see even a flicker of satisfaction. I went to her, wrapped my arms around her, and told her it would be okay. I let her cry against my shoulder, running my hand down her back like I meant every word. She didn't know every seed of doubt had been planted carefully, one after another, until they started to grow on their own. She didn't know I'd built this from the ground up, making sure the cracks in her life were in all the right places. That night, as she fell asleep beside me, still sniffling quietly, I stared at the ceiling and knew it was working. Her world was starting to turn against her, and she still thought I was the one holding it together. When she got her promotion at work, I told her we should celebrate. She seemed excited when I suggested a big dinner with friends. I made the reservations, sent out the invites, and told her it would be a night to remember. She didn't know how true that would be. I invited everyone who mattered, close friends, a few of her coworkers, and Claire, of course. I also made sure the man from the bar got an invitation through a mutual acquaintance. I didn't stop there. I made sure his girlfriend knew about the dinner too. The night of the celebration, she dressed up more than usual, looking proud of herself. She greeted everyone at the table with hugs and smiles, slipping into her seat beside me like this was her moment. The evening started normally. Drinks were poured, plates were passed around, and the noise of laughter filled the room. She told stories about her work, making herself the center of attention. I joined in, raising my glass to toast her. Everything was running smoothly. Halfway through the meal, when the conversations had splintered into smaller groups, I took out my phone. With a few taps, I airdropped the photos I'd taken weeks earlier, the ones of her kissing the man from the bar, to everyone at the table. One by one, phones lit up with the images. The shift in the room was instant. Conversations stopped. Chairs creaked as people turned to look at her. The man froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. His girlfriend, sitting across from him, stared at the screen in front of her. Then she slammed her phone down, stood up without a word, and walked out. He scrambled after her, but not before glancing at Emily with a look that was somewhere between panic and anger. The table was silent for a moment, then came the whispers. Low, sharp, impossible to ignore. Emily's face drained of color as she looked around, trying to figure out what had just happened. When she caught sight of my phone in my hand, her eyes widened. She didn't say a word. She pushed her chair back and left the restaurant in a rush, nearly knocking over a server on her way out. I stayed where I was. I finished my drink, waved the server over, and asked for the bill. When it came, I paid without hesitation. The rest of the table avoided looking at me directly, but no one asked me to explain. By the time I walked out into the cool night air, she was long gone. The celebration was over, and so was the image she'd been trying so hard to protect. It was late when I finally went back to the apartment. The lights were on, and I could hear her pacing before I even opened the door. The moment I stepped inside, she turned toward me, her face flushed, eyes sharp. "What the hell was that?" she shouted before I could say anything. "Why would you do that to me?" In front of everyone, I set my keys down on the counter and took my time taking off my jacket. "I just shared some memories," I said evenly. "You know, from our open relationship. The one you wanted." Her voice jumped in pitch. "Don't twist this. You humiliated me. You embarrassed me in front of my friends, my co-workers." She cut herself off, hands shaking. I stayed calm. "I didn't humiliate you. I just showed people the kind of freedom you've been enjoying. If you don't like how it looks, maybe it's because of what you've been doing." That's when she grabbed a glass from the table and hurled it toward the wall. It shattered, pieces scattering across the floor. "You've ruined my life," she yelled, her voice breaking. I didn't raise mine. "No, you did that yourself." She glared at me like she wanted to say more, but the words didn't come. She stood there, chest rising and falling fast, looking smaller than she had a moment ago. I walked past her, grabbed my bag from the bedroom, and zipped it shut. She followed me down the hall, asking where I was going, her voice turning from anger to something closer to desperation. I didn't stop to answer until I was at the door. "I'm done," I said simply. "You wanted space, you got it." I stepped out into the hallway, closing the door behind me. The lock clicked into place. For a second, I stood there, hearing the muffled sound of her crying inside. But I didn't go back. The elevator ride down felt strangely quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after something final. When the doors opened, I walked out without looking back. That apartment had been ours, but now it was hers, just hers. No one waiting for her to come home, no one pretending not to notice the lies, no one keeping her safe from the consequences she'd created. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't need to. The sound of it closing, soft but certain, was enough to tell her it was over. In the weeks after I left, I didn't have to do anything more. The pieces were already moving on their own. Friends started telling me little updates without me even asking. At her job, people were avoiding her. Meetings were colder, and no one lingered to talk to her afterward. The promotion she'd been so proud of didn't seem to carry the same weight anymore. Her name was being whispered in ways that had nothing to do with work. The man she'd been spending her nights with? Gone. No explanation, no goodbye. He stopped showing up at the same places she did, stopped answering her calls. From what I heard, he'd blocked her completely. Claire did more damage than I ever could have alone. She had her own reasons for wanting Emily's downfall, and she didn't hold back. The story spread quickly in the office. About the dinner, about the photos, about the way she'd been living behind everyone's back. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was fact, with proof to back it up. Even her circle of friends outside work began to pull away. People stopped inviting her to gatherings. Messages were ignored. Birthdays passed without her name on the guest list. She wasn't part of the inside jokes anymore. Through all of it, I stayed quiet. I didn't post about her, didn't tell my side publicly, didn't try to defend or attack her openly. I didn't need to. She was doing enough damage to herself just by existing in the mess she'd made. I also didn't block her number. I wanted her to see exactly what she'd lost. Every time I went out with friends, I posted a picture. Every new place I visited, every moment I looked genuinely happy, it was all there for her to scroll through. The messages started small. A "hey here, I hope you're doing well there." I didn't reply. Then they got longer. She'd mention how hard things had been lately, how she missed having someone to talk to. I ignored those too. I knew she was watching, and I made sure what she saw was a life that looked better without her in. Smiles that didn't include her, nights out she wasn't part of, people laughing beside me who weren't her. It wasn't about flaunting anything. It was about showing her the difference between what she had and what she lost. Every photo, every update, every moment of silence from me was another reminder that she had traded something real for something cheap, and ended up with nothing. Half a year passed before I heard from her again. It was just after midnight when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw her name. The message was short, "I miss you." I was wrong. I stared at it for a moment, feeling nothing sharp or angry anymore, just distance. The person who had sent that text wasn't the same one I had known years ago. She'd burned through that version of herself along with everything we had. I didn't type anything back. There was nothing left to say. I was sitting in a beach chair, the sound of the waves mixing with quiet laughter beside me. The woman next to me leaned over, brushing a strand of hair from her face, her smile easy and warm. She didn't glance at my phone, didn't need to. She trusted me, and I trusted her. There was no need for rules or arrangements, because we didn't treat loyalty like something optional. The sky was dark except for the moonlight glinting on the water. I slipped my phone face down on the small table next to my drink and turned my attention back to the moment I was in. Somewhere, Emily was probably lying in bed, phone in hand, waiting for a reply that would never come. She had reached the point I'd known she would from the start. The moment when the excitement she'd been chasing was gone, when the people she'd surrounded herself with had disappeared, when she realized there was no safety net left. She had walked through what she thought was an open door to new possibilities. But it wasn't open, it was a one-way exit. And once she crossed it, there was no going back. The waves kept rolling in, steady and calm. I leaned back, letting the cool night air settle over me, and thought about how different my life felt now. Not perfect, but solid. I didn't have to check over my shoulder. I didn't have to second-guess what was happening when I wasn't around. I hadn't just left her behind. I'd left behind the constant suspicion, the careful tracking of lies, the endless guessing game she'd turned our relationship into. My phone stayed silent after that. No follow-up message. No call. Maybe she understood I wasn't going to answer, or maybe she just ran out of words. Either way, the conversation was over before it began, and I wasn't about to open that door again, not for her, and not for anyone who couldn't see the value of keeping it shut.